Even the brightest stars can fall from the sky, and these Hollywood celebrities go to show just how hard the impact can be when they hit the ground and wind up in prison. You might recognize Jen Shah from her television reality show The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, but perhaps these days that familiarity might come from a different source. According to a statement from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Shah was involved in a 9-year scheme that used telemarketing tactics to target hundreds of unsuspecting people, including the elderly, and sell them what they called business services by lying about the benefits. On July 11, 2022, Shah pled guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud in connection with telemarketing, agreeing to forfeit $6.5 million in ill-gotten gains and pay up to $9.5 million in restitution. As part of her sentence, she will serve 6.5 years in a Texas federal prison. That sentence seems lenient, given that at one point she was looking at a potential 30 years in federal prison. To make matters worse for Shah, her famous lawyer Priya Chaudhry withdrew as her counsel earlier this year for breach of contract. The defense attorney alleges that Shah failed to make payments to her firm, leaving over $124,000 worth of legal fees unpaid. Since 2014, millions of American viewers have marveled at the financial success of Todd Chrisley through the reality television series Chrisley Knows Best. Throughout this time, audiences assumed their wealth was amassed through his business ventures as a powerful real estate tycoon, but the reality is much more complicated. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Northern District of Georgia, Todd and his wife Julie spent a decade defrauding, quote, banks out of tens of millions of dollars while evading payment to their federal income taxes. The couple secured over $36 million in personal loans by forging the requisite financial information needed by the bank, then subsequently declared bankruptcy once this money ran out. Their outstanding debt was north of $20 million. Additionally, they worked with accountant Peter Tarantino to hide $500,000 owed by Todd in accounts under Julie's name. They eventually took further steps to keep their income a secret from the Internal Revenue Service. Todd and Julie initially received federal prison sentences of 12 and 7 years, respectively. However, due to the nonviolent nature of their offenses and their conduct while in custody, their sentences were lowered by about 2 years each under the First Step Act, and are subject to further reductions pending evolving sentencing guidelines. In the late 1990s, Tammy Sytch, known by her ring name Sunny, became arguably one of the most influential wrestlers ever involved with the World Wrestling Federation. And long after the company had rebranded as the WWE, she was even inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame as the original Diva. But in the years following a handful of WWE appearances in the late 2000s, reckless and criminal behavior landed her in trouble with the law. In 2015, Sytch was arrested for 3 counts of drunk driving and was sentenced to 90 days in prison after pleading guilty to all 3 counts. Tragically, this began a pattern of arrests for driving under the influence that continued for several years, until her actions finally caused a tragedy. On March 25, 2022, Sytch crashed into a stopped vehicle while driving at 4 times the legal blood alcohol content limit. Her blood also later revealed traces of marijuana in her system. Though Sytch survived the deadly collision mostly intact, albeit with no apparent memory of having even driven the car, she killed a 75-year-old man in the other vehicle. In August 2023, she pleaded no contest to a litany of charges including manslaughter and was eventually sentenced to more than 17 years in prison. After breaking out in the 1990 John Waters film Crybaby, Amy Locane landed a series regular gig on the first season of the soap opera Melrose Place. She continued to play supporting roles here and there for the next decade or so until she announced her retirement in 2006, following her engagement to businessman Mark Bovenizer. She continued to take part in local community theater productions. After closing a show with a night of celebrating, drinking, and driving between multiple locations, she crashed into a car stopped at a red light. When the driver of the car exited his vehicle and approached her to exchange information, she attempted to flee and a chase ensued. Ultimately, Locane, driving 18 miles above the speed limit with a blood alcohol level 3 times the legal driving limit, collided with another vehicle, this time killing a 60-year-old mother of 2 and seriously injuring her husband.
Let's be clear what happened here. This woman decapitated my wife.
Locane was convicted in 2012 of second-degree vehicular homicide and assault by automobile and was sentenced to 3 years in prison, 2 years below the minimum sentence. Though the court justified its ruling by citing Locane's record, her child being seriously ill and in need of care, and that the driver of the other vehicle, the deceased's husband, had violated right-of-way rules, the leniency of the sentence caused an uproar. Despite being released from custody in 2015, Locane was resentenced 4 more times until she was finally ordered to serve an additional 8 years in 2019. She will be eligible for parole in 2024. In early 2015, Josh Duggar was arguably at the peak of his career. 19 Kids and Counting, the hit TLC reality series that turned him and his extraordinarily large family into household names, was the network's most popular program, with an average of over 2.3 million viewers per episode. The 27-year-old Duggar was also the executive director of a powerful Washington, D.C. conservative political action committee called the Family Research Council. It helped him make good on the political aspirations of his father, Jim Bob Duggar, while lobbying against gay marriage and abortion and rubbing shoulders with the likes of future House Speaker Mike Johnson. Josh Duggar was arguably living the evangelical conservative American dream. Then, on May 21, 2015, In Touch Weekly published a report outlining a disturbing pattern of sexual abuse perpetrated while he and his victims were minors. Of the 5 victims, 2 were his siblings. As a result, TLC canceled the series, and Duggar resigned from his position at FRC with a public apology. In 2021, years after this apparently contrite retreat from public life, U.S. Homeland Security discovered child sexual abuse materials on Duggar's work computer. Investigators described the contents of his hard drive as among the worst they've ever seen. Duggar was found guilty of receiving and possessing child pornography on December 9, 2021, and was sentenced to nearly 12 years in prison. He will not be eligible for release until August 2032. K-pop fans are likely most familiar with Kris Wu from his time with the immensely popular South Korean boy band EXO. However, many Americans might have first encountered this Chinese-Canadian artist after he landed supporting roles in the 2017 Vin Diesel blockbuster XXX, Return of Xander Cage, and Luc Besson's Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. In the years that followed his Hollywood breakthrough, it was alleged that Wu had been using his status as a celebrity in China to manipulate and assault multiple women, one as young as 17. He was arrested by Beijing police in 2021 on suspicion of rape. On November 25, 2022, Wu was convicted of raping 3 women and assembling a crowd to engage in sexual promiscuity. He was sentenced to a total of 13 years for both charges, though an appeal attempt is underway. He's also been ordered to pay 600 million yuan for tax evasion fines. Controversy surrounded the trial, with some fans of Wu rushing to his defense by claiming he had been falsely accused by one of the victims, who they allege was extorting Wu for money. These allegations have not been proven, and accounts defending Wu were mostly shut down. Canadian diplomats have attempted to gain access to Wu's appeals trial but were ultimately denied entirely. At the end of Wu's sentence, he will be deported from China. Throughout the 2000s and early 2010s, Jared Fogle quickly became known for 2 things: being one of the most famous brand ambassadors in America and one of the most famous sex criminals in America. After spending over a decade helping Subway establish itself as a healthy fast food brand, allegations surfaced that Fogle had used his position to harass multiple women, possessed child sexual abuse material, abused multiple minors, and even crossed state lines to commit sexual crimes against a minor.
This is about using wealth, status, and secrecy to illegally exploit children.
Though certain law enforcement individuals had been aware of similar allegations against Fogle since 2007, it wasn't until the arrest of his associate Russell Taylor, the executive director of the Jared Foundation, Fogle's charity, that authorities confirmed Fogle's involvement. His home was raided by the FBI on July 7, 2015, after which Fogle was arrested for possessing and distributing child sexual abuse material. A month later, Fogle pleaded guilty to both this charge and 1 count of traveling to engage in illicit sexual conduct with a minor. As part of his plea agreement, Fogle was sentenced to 188 months in prison, with the possibility of parole after 13 years. He was further fined $175,000 by the court, forced to forfeit $50,000 in assets, and ordered to pay restitution to each of his 14 victims, amounting to $1.4 million in total. When Fogle is released, he will be placed on the sex offender registry and will have his devices monitored for the rest of his life. Chances are you're not only familiar with the bizarre case of eccentric Oklahoma animal wrangler Joe Exotic, but were one of the tens of millions of people who watched it unfold through several hours of the Netflix series Tiger King. Released in March 2020, the series became an instant hit, with over 30 million people viewing it within the first 10 days it appeared on the platform. As a result of an escalating larger-than-life feud with a controversial CEO of Big Cat Rescue, the Western District of Oklahoma convicted Exotic of hiring 2 hitmen to kill Carol Baskin. According to the United States Attorney's Office, he was also found in violation of the Lacey Act, which involved falsifying wildlife records, as well as the Endangered Species Act, related to the killing of tigers at his enclosure. In the aftermath of the docuseries airing on Netflix, Exotic began receiving support from a wide range of newfound fans, including Cardi B and Donald Trump Jr. Though he was ultimately unsuccessful in securing a presidential pardon, Exotic did win a minor legal victory in 2021 when a panel ruled that he had been improperly sentenced. In 2022, a federal judge resentenced him to 21 years in prison, reducing his original sentence by just 1 year. This hasn't stopped Exotic from making his 4th presidential bid, his 2nd behind bars. The allegations against Danny Masterson had been surfacing for several years before his conviction in 2023. In 2017, 5 women came forward with sexual assault allegations against the actor, resulting in an immediate investigation by the Los Angeles Police Department, his firing from the Netflix series The Ranch, and the end of his time as a client of United Talent Agency. On June 17, 2020, Masterson was charged with 3 counts of rape by force or fear. He pleaded not guilty a year later, and a trial commenced in October 2022.
I've heard about you, and you'll be caught soon. I know you will. I will.
After a month of court proceedings in which the defense chose not to call any witnesses, the jury returned a mistrial verdict. A retrial was held in May 2023, which ultimately found Masterson guilty of 2 counts of felony rape. He was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison, and his first opportunity for parole won't come until 2053, when Masterson will be 77. In 2019, 4 of his accusers filed a civil suit against both Masterson and the Church of Scientology, the powerful Hollywood-based religion that has long been the subject of controversy and criticism. The accusers, previously members of the church themselves before allegedly being excommunicated for reporting Masterson to authorities, claim that the church tried to prevent them from going to the police with their accusations. In addition, current members were encouraged to harass them in further retaliation. The results of the civil suit are still pending. Of the handful of characters professional kickboxer Joe's son played during his relatively short career in Hollywood, none made as much of an impact as Random Task, a riff on the iconic James Bond Goldfinger villain Oddjob from the 1997 film Austin Powers: International Man of Mystery. This was also the final role he played, as his life would quickly spiral into a cycle of violence and criminality that ultimately ended in a decades-long prison sentence. Son's first stint in prison came after he pleaded guilty to felony vandalism for kicking in his roommate's door. He received an initial sentence of 60 days of jail time, after which he was sentenced to 90 more days for violating the terms of cooperative surveillance established in his plea deal. While in custody for this probation violation, Son's DNA was connected to a heinous sexual assault that took place in 1990. He was subsequently charged with numerous counts of a range of sex crimes, but before the trial began, these charges were dismissed due to statute of limitations rules. The only charges prosecutors were able to try Son on were conspiracy to commit murder and torture, as they were crimes that did not expire under the California Penal Code. He was found guilty in 2011 and was sentenced to 7 years to life in prison. A month into serving his prison sentence, Son murdered his cellmate, and in 2017, he was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to an additional 27 years in prison. Though not a star in the traditional sense, it could be argued that Harvey Weinstein's very public arrest and subsequent conviction is one of the most impactful legal events in the history of the entertainment industry. Following an investigative report from the New York Times that alleged 3 decades of sexual harassment, assault, and rape perpetrated by the powerful film producer, over 100 women came out as victims of his innumerable crimes. Even more women came forward with similar stories working in Hollywood, kickstarting a rapid industry-wide reckoning with sexual assault. As the conversation on workplace sexual harassment and misconduct expanded, Weinstein was investigated by officials from Los Angeles, New York City, and London, England. In 2018, he surrendered to the NYPD on several sex crimes charges filed by 2 accusers. 2 years later, he was found guilty of third-degree rape and first-degree criminal sexual activity. At the age of 67, he was sentenced to 23 years in prison. In the subsequent Los Angeles trial, Weinstein was once again found guilty of numerous sex crimes, including sexual assault and rape, and was sentenced to an additional 16 years in prison. In 2022, it was announced that London authorities would charge Weinstein with indecent assault, of which the case is still pending. Along with these criminal cases, Weinstein has also been civilly sued by several individuals, including former victims and actors who allege their careers were derailed by refusing his advances. On May 19, 2014, Michael Jace shot and killed his wife in front of their 2 young children. It was caused by a domestic dispute that prosecutors alleged stemmed from her desire to file for divorce and his paranoia that she was cheating on him. The then 53-year-old actor apparently next called his wife's father to ask him to retrieve the children before calling 911 to confess his crime. Police took him into custody that evening. Jace had previously been featured in several well-known films and television shows. In 2002, he was cast as Officer Julian Lowe on the popular FX police procedural series The Shield, a role which he played for over 6 years before the show ended in 2008. Though it was sometime later that Jace would be brought before a court for his violent acts, those who knew him closest alleged during his murder trial that the pattern had always been there. In sworn statements, numerous individuals claimed he was abusive to both women he was married to. In 2016, he was found guilty of second-degree murder and was sentenced to the maximum of 40 years with the possibility of life imprisonment.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Michael Andrew Jace, guilty of the crime of murder of April Jace.
He will be eligible for parole in 2056. In Riverdale Season 4, Episode 1, Chapter 58, In Memoriam, Canadian actor Ryan Grantham guest starred as Jeffrey Augustine in his sole series appearance. Airing in 2019, this would be Grantham's final role before he enacted a broad yet deadly scheme that ended in the killing of his mother. Grantham had reportedly experienced a rapid mental decline in the months leading up to the March 2020 crime that manifested itself in drug abuse, the consumption of disturbing material, and suicidal ideation. For a yet unknown reason, he chose to execute his mother before embarking on a drive to Ottawa. It was there, armed with guns, ammunition, and makeshift explosives, he planned to attack his high school and, afterward, assassinate Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. En route to his school, however, Grantham experienced what the judge interpreted as a moment of lucidity or moral clarity, and instead drove to the nearest police department, where he turned himself in. Grantham pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, a crime which carries an automatic life sentence in Vancouver. At his sentencing hearing, the judge ruled that Grantham would be eligible for parole in 14 years, at which time he will be in his mid-30s. Mitigating circumstances that contributed to the leniency of his sentence were his behavior in prison, his participation in psychiatric programs while in custody, and his perceived remorse in the eyes of the court. Starting in 2011, the Discovery Channel began producing a reality television series called Sons of Guns, which followed the day-to-day operations of Louisiana-based firearms company Red Jacket Firearms, LLC. The company was owned and operated by William Hayden, a Baton Rouge native who had been fascinated with weaponry his entire life. In August 2014, Hayden was arrested on charges of juvenile molestation and aggravated crimes against nature, a relatively broad legal term that includes any sexual acts the state deems to be unnatural. Despite Hayden denying these claims, the Discovery Channel quickly canceled Sons of Guns, and Hayden was legally separated from Red Jacket Firearms, LLC. Soon after, increasingly disturbing allegations arose, and after multiple separate legal proceedings, Hayden received 3 consecutive life sentences plus 40 years for a litany of sex crimes. If you or anyone you know has been a victim of sexual assault, help is available. Visit the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network website or contact RAIN's National Helpline at 1-800-656-HOPE 4673.